So it turns out that the ceasefire that we all knew was tenuously held together by Trump's own narcissism, and of course, Israel taking advantage of Trump's own need to look good in the world, and of course, Israel wanting to have some of that plausible deniability that it wasn't just committing a genocide for the sake of erasing the people of Gaza. We knew that this so-called ceasefire was tenuously held together and that Israel was going to break it sooner or later. And lo and behold, Israel killed 100 people in a space of 2 days. It broke the ceasefire. And furthermore, the justification it gave was that 2 IDF soldiers were killed by, supposedly, allegedly, by Hamas. Only that it turned out that these soldiers were killed by their own bombs, by their own unexploded bombs. But will the media really report on this? Will they shed light on the fact that Israel has been lying, the fact that Israel has been belligerent in any kind of rejecting any kind of everlasting, long-lasting peace? No, because of course, as Norman Finkelstein says, what's happening right now is a godsend to the far-right expansionist Zionists. They see Gaza the same way, like a hungry animal sees, especially a carnivorous animal, sees a piece of meat, a fresh piece of meat that's just in plain view. And they are hungry. They are hungry to devour this piece of meat. And this is because of the fact that Israel, you have to go back, look at history and how Israel itself is a colony, and it is based on an expansionist ideology of Zionism, which disregarded the people that were already living there, of Palestine. So the land was originally called Palestine. Now, the argument that is made, there's multiple arguments being made, is that this was terra nullius, that this is a land without a people, and therefore Israel was for a people without a land, only that this was a complete lie. It turns out that when this declaration, known as the Balfour Declaration, made by the UK government, in that it would preserve this land for the Jewish people, a Jewish homeland, it turns out that 95% of the people that were living there were Arab, Christians, and Muslims. So they wanted to give a land, or rather, Zionists pushed this, obviously. They wanted to give a land to the Palestinians, from the Palestinians to the Zionists, that was already occupied by Palestinians. So in order to acquire this, they needed to ethnically cleanse the land. They needed to conquer the land. Now, an argument that is made to give the benefit of the doubt to these colonists is that what they really wanted was to live together in peace with the Palestinians and live in kumbaya, harmony. Only that the own Israeli politicians and the early Zionists, they were very clear about the fact that they didn't want to share the land on a common ground. Moshe Sharett, the future first foreign minister of Israel, said, "We did not come to a land to inhabit it. We came to a land to conquer it." Vladimir Zeev Jabotinsky was another prominent Zionist who was very much aware of the fact that the Palestinians were trying to defend their own homeland. He said, if any indigenous people will fight and defend their land against the invader. And he was specifically talking about the Palestinians, the Arabs, as the indigenous people. And so what's happening right now is a culmination of history and how they want to eradicate the Palestinians. And Nakba, which is what is translated as the catastrophe, is purported to be something that happened on 1947 to 1948. Only that the Nakba is a continuation throughout history. It's never actually stopped. The only way it could stop is if Israel would stop expanding into the West Bank, and that Israel itself would cease to exist. Because for Israel to exist in its vision as a Jewish ethno-state, it needs to maintain a high proportion of Jewish people to Palestinian people. So they would still need to remove Palestinians or keep them hostage. They would need to somehow suppress the population so that it does not grow beyond the what is the part of their quota for existing. So Palestinians, yes, do exist in Israel, but they are controlled. There are 65 laws against the Palestinians that live there, and they are largely just a way to whitewash the image of Israel, because of course Israel itself is only there for the purposes of maintaining the ethno-state. And of course it treats different groups of people depending on its ability to make effective change. So Gaza is more of a problem for Israel. Well, both Gaza and West Bank are a problem because, of course, they actually have power. Only that it became clear to the leadership of Israel that in order to thwart the self-determination of Palestinians to create their own, to have their own state, they would need to have a ruse in order to destroy any kind of political movement. And they did this in multiple kind of like prongs. They did this in multiple ways. One of which is they imprisoned Marwan Barghouti, who's a powerful political figure, who's respected in both in West Bank and Gaza, and of course he is respected by both parties, by Hamas and Fatah. But they obviously, because by virtue of being a powerful orator, powerful speaker, intelligent analyst, he was imprisoned. Another way they did this was by empowering Hamas as an asset, because they were obviously the more extremist elements of the resistance movements. And so they empowered the Hamas as a way to drive a wedge between Gaza, the West Bank. They also empowered Gaza, the Hamas, by presenting an image of Hamas as the more extremist element that you cannot work with, and therefore you cannot have a Palestinian state with these people in power. Which is essentially, you cannot have Palestinians having their own power. They're ruling their own land, and of course maintaining their own statehood. So from the onset, they wanted to use Hamas as a way to drive a wedge between the two different parties, but also to thwart any political attempts for Palestinian statehood, and then proving to the world that Palestinian statehood would not be possible amidst the continual existence of this ethno-state. And so they empowered Hamas. They would allow for the transfer of funds to Hamas. They would even, selectively give funds to Hamas. This is all a way to eventually use them as a scapegoat in order to obviously stop thwart the self-determination of Palestinian people. And so it's not a surprise to me that the Palestinians now have been libeled. They've been they've been smeared as Hamas sympathizers. And of course, the example of Hamas, they're not using the example of peaceful protesters who are part of the Hamas party. They're using the example of October 7th, because of course it is shrouded in some sort of ambiguity, because we don't know the true facts of what happened. I'm not saying that it wasn't a horrible event, but I also know that due to the Handmul Directive, this is a part of a policy within Israel military strategy, in that if you are, if you have to use lethal force against your own civilians in order to prevent the accomplishment of your enemy's goals, you can use it. And so when the day came, there are reports of IDF soldiers, IDF generals being told to step down. There's also a delay in the response by the Israeli government and the Israeli military. There's a lot of question marks. The fact that a huge Apache, helicopters were used to just destroy, carte blanche, these areas of military engagement between Hamas and Israeli, largely army. I think they killed, from what you can look at numbers, they killed a lot of IDF soldiers, and it's not clear to me that the civilians that were killed, because let's not forget that Israeli government, Israeli society is a Spartan one. It's it's conscripted military service based society. So therefore, civilians tend to eventually become part of this military, which is unfortunate. And this is why the indoctrination of civilians is so crucial, because it means it increases morale and increases the uptake of people who join the army. Otherwise, you wouldn't. Not that you have much choice other than to be detained for 30 to 90 days at a time, and then released and then detained. It's quite a. It's not a society that is conventionally liberal, progressive. It uses these to whitewash its image, as it sees itself as a Western outpost in the Middle East. As Theodor Herzl, the founder of political Zionism, wanted to see Israel as a political outpost, but actually it has elements that are barbaric, pre-medieval even, that we do not have any kind of common ground on when it comes to their way of thinking about things, morally speaking. Just the fact that they use the example of IDF soldiers being killed by their own bombs as a pretext to continue the war, and lying in the process, is they have no problem with lying. They don't have a problem with preventing any peace process. And so, what is their end goal? Their end goal is to maintain this ethno-state at all costs, in the same way the Nazis underwent all kinds of moral atrocities, monstrosities, in order to maintain their ethno-state. You see, genocide and Holocaust, these are a means to an end. This is a confusion, utter confusion, that liberals don't understand. Genocide and Holocaust aren't a big problem for these people, because they are tools. They're merely means. It's not what the end isn't genocide or Holocaust. The end is this utopia of maintaining this ethno-state. So we need to understand this. The goal is that shiny light at the end of the tunnel. And that is what they're looking forward to. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. That'd be very much appreciated. Thank you.